This is Late Night Classics with me, Bibi Jacob. I'll be reading you my selection of Greek and Roman classics to accompany you into the night. The day had been unseasonably hot. We were sitting in the garden, enjoying the balmy evening, when we suddenly noticed something shifting in the cherry tree. We abandoned our wine, rose and approached the tree with trepidation. A moving clump of darkness had formed in the tree. We stepped closer. It was a huge cluster of dark bees, formed high on a tree branch. A shifting mass, it was strangely beautiful. Black bees are rare. They're frighteningly close to extinction. We felt lucky to have such a visitation, but also a little concerned. We knew the weather was about to turn wintry in the next few days. So what would become of the bees? Virgil was a bit of an expert on bees. He would certainly have had some good advice for us. In the Georgics, a poem of 4 books which celebrates the natural world and agriculture, Virgil wrote extensively about how to care for a hive. First, seek a settled home for your bees, whither the winds may find no access, for the winds let them not carry home their food, where no ewes or sportive kids may trample the flowers, nor straying heifer brush off the dew from the mead and bruise the spring blade. Let the spangled lizard with his scaly back be also a stranger to the rich stalls, and the bee-eater and other birds, and Procne, the swallow, with breast marked by her blood-stained hands. For these spread havoc far and near, and while the bees are on the wing, carry them off in their mouths, a sweet morsel for their cruel nestlings. But let clear springs be near, and moss-green pools, and a tiny brook stealing through the grass, and let a palm or huge wild olive shade the porch, so that when the new kings lead forth the early swarms in the spring they love, and the youth revel in their freedom from the combs, a bank nearby may tempt them to quit the heat, and a tree in their path may hold them in its sheltering leafage. In the midst of the water, whether it stand idle or flow onward, cast willows athwart and huge stones, that they may have many bridges whereon to halt and spread their wings in the summer sun, if haply the east wind has sprinkled the loiterers, or with swift gust has plunged them in the flood. All about let green cassia bloom, and wild thyme with fragrance far borne, and a wealth of strong-scented savoury, and let violet beds drink of the trickling spring. As the bees buzzed on the tree, we searched online and found the number of a local beekeeper. The light was beginning to dim. Soon the bees would sleep. But serendipity was at play. The beekeeper answered instantly. She only lived a few minutes away, and by chance had an empty hive at the ready. The divine beekeeper is Aristaeus. He's a minor deity who rather nastily causes the death of Eurydice. There are consequences to his actions. When his bees die, he seeks out his mother for advice. She tells him to capture Proteus, the prophetic sea god. Once he's caught him, Proteus will tell Aristaeus how to recover the bees. This telling of the Orpheus and Eurydice story also comes from Virgil's Georgics. Here, Aristaeus' mother Cyrene advises her son. In Neptune's Carpathian flood there dwells a seer, Proteus, of sea-green hue, who traverses the mighty main in his car, drawn by fishes and a team of 2-footed steeds. To him we nymphs do reverence, and aged Nereus himself, for the seer has knowledge of all things, what is, what hath been, what is in train before long to happen. For so has it seemed good to Neptune, whose monstrous herds and unsightly seals he pastures beneath the wave. Him, my son, you must first take in fetters, that he may unfold to you all the cause of the sickness, and bless the issue. For without force he will give you no counsel, nor shall you bend him by prayer. With stern force and fetters make fast the captive. Thereon alone his wiles will shatter themselves in vain. I myself, when the sun has kindled his noonday heat, when the grass is athirst, and the shade is now welcome to the flock, will guide you to the aged one's retreat, whither when weary he retires, so that you may assail him with ease as he lies asleep. But when you hold him in the grasp of hands and fetters, then will manifold forms baffle you, and figures of wild beasts. For of a sudden he will become a bristly boar, a deadly tiger, a scaly serpent, or a lioness with tawny neck. Or he will give forth the fierce roar of flame, and thus slip from his fetters, or he will melt into fleeting water and be gone. But the more he turn himself into all shapes, the more, my son, should you tighten his fetters, until after his last changes of body he becomes such as you saw when he closed his eyes at the beginning of slumber. She spoke, and shed abroad ambrosia's fragrant stream, wherewith she steeped her son's whole frame. And lo, a sweet effluence breathed from his smoothened locks, and vigour and suppleness passed into his limbs. There is a vast cavern, hollowed in a mountainside, whither many a wave is driven by the wind, then separates into receding inlets, at times a haven most sure for storm-caught mariners. Within, Proteus shelters himself with the barrier of a huge rock. Here, the nymph stations the youth in ambush, away from the light. She herself, veiled in mist, stands aloof. And now the dog-star, fiercely parching the thirsty Indians, was ablaze in heaven, and the fiery sun had consumed half his course. The grass was withering, and the hollow streams in their parched throats were scorched and baked by the rays down to the slime, when Proteus came from the waves, in quest of his wonted cave. About him the watery race of the vast deep gambolled, scattering afar the briny spray. The seals lay them down to sleep, here and there along the shore. He himself sits down on a rock in the midst, and counts their number. Soon as the chance came to Aristaeus, he scarce suffered the aged one to settle his weary limbs before he burst upon him with a loud cry and surprised him in fetters as he lies. On his part, the seer forgets not his craft, but changes himself into all wondrous shapes, into flame and hideous beast and flowing river. But when no stratagem wins escape, vanquished, he returns to himself, and at last speaks with human voice. "Why, who," he cried, "most presumptuous of youths, bade you invade our home, or what seek you hence?" But Aristaeus replied, "You know, Proteus, you know of course, nor may one deceive you in aught, but give up your wish to deceive. Following the counsel of heaven, we are come to seek hence an oracle for our weary fortunes." So much he spoke. On this the seer, yielding at last to mighty force, rolled on him eyes ablaze with grey-green light, and grimly gnashing his teeth, thus opened his lips to tell of fate's decrees. "It is a god, no other, whose anger pursues you. Great is the crime you are paying for. This punishment, far less than you deserve, unhappy Orpheus arouses against you. Did not fate interpose, and rages implacably for the loss of his bride. She, in headlong flight along the river, if only she might escape you, saw not, doomed maiden, amid the deep grass the monstrous serpent at her feet that guarded the banks. but her sister band of dryads filled the mountaintops with their cries. But he, solacing an arching heart with music from his hollow shell, sang of you, dear wife, sang of you to himself on the lonely shore, of you as day drew nigh, of you as day departed. He even passed through the jaws of Taenarum, the lofty portals of Dis, the grove that is murky with black terror, and made his way to the land of the dead with its fearful king, and hearts no human prayers can soften. Stirred by his song, up from the lowest realms of Erebus came the unsubstantial shades, the phantoms of those who lie in darkness, as many as the myriads of birds that shelter among the leaves when evening or a wintry shower drives them from the hills. Women and men, and figures of great-souled heroes, their life now done, boys and girls unwed, and sons placed on the pyre before their fathers' eyes. But round them are the black ooze and unsightly reeds of Cocytus, the unlovely mere enchaining them with its sluggish water, and Styx holding them fast within his ninefold circles. Still more, the very house of death and deepest abysses of hell were spellbound, and the Furies with livid snakes entwined in their hair. Cerberus stood agape, and his triple jaws forgot to bark. The wind subsided, and Ixion's wheel came to a stop. And now, as he retraced his steps, he had avoided all mischance, and the regained Eurydice was nearing the upper world, following behind, for that condition had Proserpine imposed, when a sudden frenzy seized Orpheus, unwary in his love, a frenzy meet for pardon, did hell know how to pardon. He halted, and on the very verge of light, unmindful, alas, and vanquished in purpose, on Eurydice, now regained, looked back. In that instant, all his toil was spilt like water, the ruthless tyrant's pact was broken, and thrice a peal of thunder was heard amid the pools of Avernus. She cried, "What madness, Orpheus, what dreadful madness has brought disaster alike upon you and me, poor soul? See again the cruel fates call me back, and sleep seals my swimming eyes. And now farewell, I am borne away, covered in night's vast pall, and stretching towards you strengthless hands, regained alas no more." She spoke, and straightway from his sight, like smoke mingling with thin air, vanished afar, and saw him not again, as he vainly clutched at the shadows with so much left unsaid. Nor did the ferryman of Orcus suffer him again to pass the barrier of the marsh. What could he do? Whither turn, twice robbed of his wife? With what tears move hell? To what deities address his prayers? She indeed, already death cold, was afloat in the Stygian bark. Of him they tell that for 7 whole months, day after day, beneath a lofty crag, beside lonely Strymon stream, he wept, and in the shelter of cool dales unfolded his tale, charming tigers and drawing oaks with his song, even as a nightingale, mourning beneath a poplar's shade, bewails her young one's loss, when a heartless ploughman, watching their resting place, has plucked them unfledged from the nest. The mother weeps all night long, as perched on a branch, she repeats her piteous song, and fills all around with plaintive lamentation. No thought of love or wedding song could bend his soul. Alone he roamed the frozen north, along the icy Tanais, and the fields ever wedded to Riphean snows, mourning his lost Eurydice and Pluto's cancelled boon, till the Ciconian women, resenting such devotion in the midst of their sacred rites and their midnight Bacchic orgies, tore the youth limb from limb and flung him over the far-spread plains. And even when Oeagrian Hebrus rolled, in mid-current that head, severed from its marble neck, the disembodied voice and the tongue, now cold forever, called with departing breath on Eurydice. Ah, poor Eurydice! Eurydice, The banks re-echoed all along the stream. Thus spoke Proteus, and at a bound plunged into the deep sea, and where he plunged whirled the water into foam beneath the eddy. Cyrene stayed, and straightway spoke to the startled youth. You may dismiss from your mind the care that troubles it. This is the whole cause of the sickness, and hence it is that the nymphs, with whom she used to tread the dance in the deep groves, have sent this wretched havoc on your bees. You must offer as suppliants gifts, sue for peace, and pay homage to the gentle maidens of the woods, for they will grant pardon to prayers and relax their wrath. But first I will tell you in order the manner of your supplication. Pick out 4 choice bulls of surpassing form that now graze among your herds. For these, set up 4 altars by the stately shrines of the goddesses, and drain the sacrificial blood from their throats, but leave the bodies of the steers within the leafy grove. Later, when the 9th dawn displays her rising beams, you must offer to Orpheus funeral dews of Lethe's poppies, slay a black ewe, and revisit the grove. Then, with Eurydice appeased, you should honour her with the slaying of a calf. Tarrying not, he straightway does his mother's bidding. He comes to the shrine, raises the altars appointed, and leads there 4 choice bulls of surpassing form and as many heifers of unyoked neck. Later, when the 9th dawn had ushered in her rising beams, he offers to Orpheus the funeral dews and revisits the grove. But here they espy a portent, sudden and wondrous to tell. Throughout the paunch, amid the molten flesh of the oxen, bees buzzing and swarming forth from the ruptured sides, then trailing in vast clouds, till at last, on a treetop, they stream together and hang in clusters from the bending boughs. As night set in, the beekeeper climbed a high ladder and incredibly managed to bag the queen bee. She pulled the bees from her bag into the makeshift hive, climbed the ladder a second time, and captured more of the bees. Honey and bees sweeten many Greco-Roman myths, but sometimes they appear so briefly we can miss them if we're not attentive. When the Cumaean Sibyl needs to appease Cerberus in the Aeneid, she throws him a drugged honey cake. And it may be that the Sibyl's father was Glaucus of Crete, son of Minos and Pasiphae, the same Glaucus who died when he fell into a cask of honey and was restored to life by the seer Polyidus. Bees are often linked to prophecy. Which leads us straight to Delphi. According to Pausanias, the Delphians say that the second temple was made by bees from beeswax and feathers, and that it was sent to the Hyperboreans by Apollo. And the Pythia herself is compared to a bee. Pindar, in his 4th Pythian, calls her the oracle of the Delphic bee. Virgin priestesses of goddesses like Rhea and Demeter were also known as bees, Melissae. And near the end of the Homeric hymn to Hermes, Apollo gifts his little brother Hermes with 3 prophetesses. He says, "There are certain holy ones, sisters born, 3 virgins, gifted with wings. Their heads are besprinkled with white meal, and they dwell under a ridge of Parnassus. These are teachers of divination apart from me. From their home they fly now here, now there, feeding on honeycomb and bringing all things to pass. And when they are inspired through eating yellow honey, they are willing to speak truth. But if they be deprived of the God-sweet food, then they speak falsely as they swarm in and out together. These then I give you." The beekeeper came to see us the next day with a pot of honey. Since then, she sends us regular updates. The black bees from our garden are thriving in their new hive by the canal. We'll visit them soon, and if they bestow us with any oracular gifts, I promise I'll let you know. Late Night Classics is presented by me, Bibi Jacob. The original violin compositions in this episode are by Chloe Dunn. Sound and production by Geoff Chong. I read from Book 4 of Virgil's Georgics in a translation by H.R. Fairclough. From Book 10 of Pausanias' Description of Greece, translated by WHS Jones. And from the Homeric Hymn to Hermes, translated by H.G. Evelyn-White. All translations are in the public domain. If you want to listen to our retelling of the Orpheus and Eurydice myth, the link is in the show notes.